Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solider. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, we got to the end of that interview, Rudy, and, I said to you, and I think you had the same thought, there's so much we didn't even cover, and an hour went by, so we decided to do a part two. So you're going to see part one, if you're listening, on September 17th, and you can see part two on October 1st, I believe it is. So, Rudy, let's talk a little bit about international business development and how you've done what you've done.
Well, for me, it happened, I told you in the first part of the interview that in our system back then, because there was no multi-level, you tried to achieve a thing called area coordinator, which I did. I left New Jersey and I went to Baltimore, Maryland as an area coordinator. And then, and I did very well with that, fortunately, because I was excited, I was young, and I was willing to work hard. And it grew and things were going great. And we wound up the company at that time was expanding internationally. And I wound up going to a seminar, a meeting, a company meeting. And at that meeting, a guy named Chuck Simmons, who was the international vice president for the company at that time, said from the front of the stage, he said, hey, if any of you want to go international, if you speak another language, if you want to let us know, because we're looking for people who want to go international. So he comes down, and myself and my buddy was sitting in the second row right behind Chuck and the leaders, Bill Bailey, and the people who were the heads of the companies. We're sitting in the second row. And my buddy leans over and says to Chuck when he sits down, says, hey, Rudy speaks German. Send his butt to Germany. As a joke, I got home to Baltimore, and my phone was ringing off the hook. There were messages of people. We didn't have the answering machines and all of this stuff. So there were notes for me at the hotel. There were notes for me at various places. Hey, call Chuck, call Chuck. So I called Chuck, and basically Chuck says, Rudy, how would you like to become an executive, what do they call it? Executive vice president. Because so it's area coordinator, regional director, and then executive vice president. And there were only 6 of those in America at that time. There were like 50 of us area coordinators. And he says on the phone, that's his first opening statement, how would you like to become an executive vice president? I said, yes. I didn't care where, because I was just about to get promoted to become regional director of upstate New York. And so I thought maybe that's why he was calling for my next promotion. Yay. And he says, yeah. He says, but it's in Germany. Oh, no, you're kidding me. I got to go to Germany? Yeah, but you'll be the executive vice president. So anyway, make a long story short, the guy, Bill Bailey, at that time, he was receiving, not Lifetime Achievement, but Horatio Alger Award. So we were in New York City as area coordinators and stuff to attend this. And they said, look, tonight, after the event, you're going to come up and meet Bill Bailey in his suite. Well, Bill Bailey, us was like a god back then. I mean, we didn't meet him personally. So they invited me up to a suite, and I got all these questions about going to Germany. What about this? What about that? What's going to happen? Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to give? And Bill Bailey sits across, and I'm 23-year-old. By then I was 24, and I'm scared to death. And I start asking questions, and Bill Bailey says in his deep voice, he says, Mr. Revak, we'll take care of it. Well, now what am I going to ask? I can't. He's already said, shut up. Don't ask me any more questions. We'll take care of it. So I said, yes, I'd go. So I had a brand new wife. I'd just gotten married. I pack up my furniture, send it to Germany. They told me they were going to give me a car. They'd have a house there for me. And I was going to become the sales leader of the company. Okay. They forgot to tell me one little thing. And that was when I got to Germany, there were no distributors left except for a handful. The company had been doing X amount of sales a month. I don't know, like $500,000 a month of sales. And that was a lot back then. And they were going to give me an override of 1%. Plus I could still build my own business. So my override for the commission was 1%. And I could still build my own personal business, which we always did back then. Even as area coordinators, regional directors, that's how you get promoted. It was based on your personal business. And I get to Germany. they forgot to tell me, but the guy who was running the company, he and another guy from England had just spun off and started a new company called 𝐕𝐈𝐃𝐄 and took all the distributors with them, which is why they needed me to go there so bad. But they neglected to tell me that, which in the end result wound up being a godsend. And so I went to work. I started to build my own personal business in Germany. And although I spoke some German, the German I spoke was what in Germany is called dirty German. It's a southern dialect from southern Germany, or Schwabish. And so here I am in Frankfurt, the capital, financial capital of Europe, basically in Germany. And I speak this terrible German. So I start building my business. I started doing what I knew how to do. I put ads in the paper. I talking to people who spoke English, and I started building. And I would always look for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people that I knew were willing to work. And I usually look for higher level people. And I found a couple of them, a doctor and a businessman that I got into the business, and they did great. And I used all the funny story. One of the first things I did, because in the States, what we used to do, one of the ways was we had a card, and it would say earn an extra 500 to 1,000 a month part-time, Paul, and just a number. And we would hand these cards out, right? Maybe in front of a mall or whatever. So I have this card written in German, says earn extra money, part-time, call. And I go down on the street in Frankfurt and I start trying to hand out these cards. And people are going like I've got some kind of disease or something. Well, I didn't know it, but at that time, prostitution was legal, and the way pimps recruited was handing out cards on the street. So that didn't work too well. But anyway, the business started to grow because I was building relationships, and I was doing it one at a time by myself. I wasn't looking to make a killing. And the business grew, and we did terrific. And then from there, they sent me to Canada. Canada wasn't doing well. I took over Canada, same thing. I got myself, well, at that time, there were 4 guys that I recruited that really put my heart and soul into, because I was always looking, as I said, for the right kind of guys. I'd rather spend my time with 3, 4 people and make them successful than to get 100 people in, right? And hope that somebody makes it. And I remember in the military, in the military, they don't allow a lieutenant, a corporal can only have maximum 5 lieutenants under them. A major only has 5, maximum 5 corporals, 3 to 5. They don't let you go over 5 because it's hard to do that. So I always focused on building some other leadership. As a matter of fact, just a few months ago, one of the original guys I recruited in Canada, he's still with that company from those days up in Canada. He didn't follow me. He stayed with that company. And he came down and we spent a week together here at my house. And he's still in the business, still working 50 years later. So anyway, and then from Canada grew. We did great. We had lots of headaches back then. But the thing about it is that in each of these countries, people are always saying, oh, well, yeah, but they're different here in Germany, and they're different here in Canada. And then I went to Italy, and I did the same thing in Italy, built my own personal organization. The people in Italy are different. Yes, people are different. No doubt about it. Different cultures, different types of food, But you know what? When it comes down, they love their family. They want hope and opportunity the same as every other person in the world. Everywhere I've been and done business, except maybe in some of the Middle Eastern countries. Other than that, every other place, it was the same. People were the same all over the world. So I always use that same philosophy. And I guess the point is that if you're building your business and your company is international, don't be afraid of going international. There's no fear in that. Those people want the same thing that you want here. They want hope for their family and themselves. They want a promise of the future. That's what they want. And that's what we sell in this industry. No matter what your product line is. I'm sure you have a good product line. And you got it. People say to me, well, Rudy, what do you do first? Sell product or promote the opportunity? Answer, both, because that's what people need. They need both. If they want to buy the product, great, I'm happy. But if they want the opportunity, I want to make sure I shared that with them. So I don't know. Does that make sense, John?
Absolutely. So if I had to ask you if there was one place in the world besides Houston, Texas, where you currently are, if there was one place in the world that you could go work your business and live, what would it be?
Italy. Okay. I love my time in Italy. I lived there for 2 years, traveled the whole country. People are great. Country's beautiful, and the food is fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I'm with
having
you.
said that, there are all over this world, there are some beautiful people. We've got people in the Philippines. They are so sweet and so terrific. We've got people down in Mexico, up in Canada, you name it. But you ask for one place?
Yeah.
I like Italy.
Okay, I'm with you on that. That's a good place. Yeah, the other place I fell in love with was Iceland a few years ago.
Iceland?
Unbelievable. Yeah, have you been there yet?
I visited there, but never to spend any significant time.
I was only there for a week, but we were following a map. I'm diverting here from our conversation, but we're following this map. We took a tour, self-guided tour, and I said to my wife, I said, there are waterfalls in that country bigger than Niagara Falls that aren't even on the map because they are small in comparison to some of the big waterfalls that they bother to put on the map. Unbelievable, unbelievable. But anyway, let's come back to something else. We talked about social media on our first interview, and like every tool, social media is a big tool, a big general tool. How to use it effectively and how it becomes a negative.
From my way of thinking, the way to use it, like any other tool, is use it to develop a list of names, use it to bring people to you. But once you have those people, now what do you do with them? You don't, in my opinion, you don't instantly get that new person on, okay, now blast out this message to all of the people on your list of names. It's not the way to build a business, right? You still have to, once you get that person, now go through the basics with them. Get on a call with them, have a home meeting with them, have a Zoom meeting with them and their friends. Get their list of names. That's the way to do the business, not just blast out information. You might as well put an ad on TV. Just, that'll bring you some business. It'll get you a few sales, but it's not going to build a long-term business, in my opinion. I know there's some other people out there training on social media, and they say, oh, you put up these boards and then you just have all your people put this message out. No, that doesn't build any relationships, and we are a relationship business.
So I heard a term, and it may have been Jim Rohn that said this, I forget, somewhere in all my years, about three things that destroy a business like ours: ego, greed, arrogance. Love your thoughts on how to control all three.
Well, the only way I usually try to identify with people and subjects is by giving them examples. And I think you heard on something else you mentioned before, but one of the things that happened to me, I told you that when I started in the business, I didn't do well 9 months. Then I started to do really well. They promote me to go to Baltimore, Maryland as an area coordinator. And I had a meeting location in Towson, Maryland, just north of the city. And man, we started to do great. Not because I was terrific, but I was working hard and I was excited and I had this opportunity and it was just magic for me. And the business grew and grew and grew. And I was making all this money. I'm making $10,000 a month as a 24-year-old kid in 1970, what was that, 1972. That's a lot of money back then. And I was spending it as fast as I could make it. Buying cars and doing this and that. Anyway, what happened to me over a period of time as I started to make more money, as I got more successful, as I got more recognition. Here I am, one of the top 10 area coordinators in the country, being invited to California once a month to their meeting because we had like 50, 60 area coordinators. And if you were in the top 10, you got invited to the regional director meeting monthly. And so all of this is swelling my ego. And I got to be so egotistical that some of my friends who were with me in Baltimore and were building their business tried to tell me. And of course, when your ego is out of control, you don't want to listen to anybody except the guy in the mirror, who's usually the wrong guy to listen to at that point. And so they went to my regional director, who at that point was Marty Day, and talked to him about this, about how and by the way, my business now is collapsing. It's coming down and it's not growing anymore because of me and what I was doing. I wouldn't have admitted that then. And my business was deteriorating instead of growing. And so they tell Marty Day about me and what, Rudy doesn't listen anymore. He's not doing this, he's not doing that. Anyway, so one day Marty comes to town to do a meeting with me, and he tries to tell me this as a friend. He's got me in his hotel room, and he tries to tell me, look, Rudy, you've got to get your ego under control. Well, no, Marty, it's not me, it's them. And I had all these, and now it's getting late and we got to go to the meeting. It's going to start. And so we're still walking out of his room and going down, those old motel rooms where you walk on the outside of the building, the door, and then the hallway is the outside. And we're walking along there. And he keeps trying to get me straightened out. And finally, he gets so mad. He was a construction worker, so he was a tough little guy. And he grabs me by the suit jacket and puts me up against the wall, and he starts screaming in my face and calling me the construction worker names. And to make a long story short, I said to myself, hey, he's really serious about this. But that's what it took to get through to me, my hard German head. And he did. By doing that to me, that was a good thing for him to do. I didn't like it at the time. I hated it. I didn't agree with it. I didn't believe that he was right. I was right. He was wrong. But that helped me tremendously. And after that, I started to take the philosophy, never forget where you came from. And that's why I always go back to my roots and tell people I'm a chicken farmer. And I still am that chicken farmer. I thank God I've made a lot of money. Thank God I've had success. I've got a lot of great people around me. I've traveled the whole world. I've got all these beautiful things. But you know what? I'm still a chicken farmer that got lucky. So please, folks, if you're listening to this and you're a leader, and whether you've got 10 people or 10,000 people in your downline, don't ever forget where you came from. You're the same person you were when you were that nurse, or you were that construction worker, or you were that auto mechanic, or you were that teacher. You're not a different person. You just got fortunate enough to be in this business, this industry that gave you the chance. Yes, you worked hard, and yes, you had to grow to get where you are, but don't ever forget where you came from, because you'll start going backwards.
Great advice. And let's come back to personal development, though, because you've been a student of personal development at least since 1970. It's a long time. What do you practice today? Is there a certain amount of reading that you do, either time-wise or pages-wise? Is there something you listen to? What's your personal development calendar look like, say, tomorrow?
Well, my personal development, I think, comes a lot from just going back to the basics. The old principles that Jim Rohn taught are as valid today as they were when I joined 50 years ago. They haven't changed. Okay, there's new ways to use examples and there's new ways to talk about them, but it's kind of like the Bible. All of that information that Jim Rohn talked about, you can find in the Bible. It's been around for thousands of years. Now, how we sell it, how we train on it. So to answer your question, John, I think the story is, as I go to the front of the room and I'm training other people, in order to do that, I've got to be talking to myself first. And so it constantly is a refresher. I don't have to come up with new things. Oh, maybe new stories or new, ways to relate in today's world. But the basics to personal development, as we talked before, for things to change, I have to change. For things to get better, I have to get better. And how I do that? Through attitude, through belief in myself, belief in my company, belief in God, through work ethic, my work ethic. Am I continuing to do what I did when I got in this business to get started, right? Through goals, my dreams. Do I still have dreams? Do I still have goals? Am I still looking at what's coming tomorrow? Not where am I today? Where was I? Where am I going tomorrow, right? And of course, in the last one, which I believe is the most important one, it put me here today. It's called persistence. Never giving up. Never stop working. Don't tell me about how, oh yeah, I used to have a check for $20,000 a month, and now that check is down to $10,000 a month, and things aren't going good. Well, maybe you ought to go and look in the mirror. Maybe they're not going as good because you're not going as good. You're not doing what you did that got you there. You're looking for different ways of doing it. I say that to some of our people all the time. Oh, my check is down. Well, what did you do to get that check up? Oh, well, I was out talking to people, and I was doing meetings, and I was doing trainings. And how many people did you talk to yesterday? Oh, well, I was on the phone with my organization. No. How many did you recruit yesterday? How many new people did you get? Because that's where the future is. It's not in the old people. The future is in the new. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. Well, and it also, I think, you've been an owner how many years now? What was the first company?
Well, the first time I started my own was 1995.
95. So
but I ran a company, as I said, in Italy, Germany, Canada, US, several of them in the US. But then I went out and I started Symmetry in 1995.
95. So, okay. So 30 years, let's call it. So let me frame this question this way. Do you see yourself, right? So you own the company, but because you're a distributor at heart, you've been a distributor for a long time, even before 1995. Do you see the company as the ultimate upline to every distributor and that you're building a distributorship as a company. It's just that, obviously the company's got other roles, with regulatory and shipping and blah, blah, blah. A lot of the things that a company owner has to deal with that we don't have to, thank God, as distributors. But how do you see that philosophically, so that that new distributor who starts in one of your companies this afternoon says, hey, I can count on Rudy for, fill in the blank. What can they count on as a company that you're going to provide them, so that if their upline is either new in the industry, or maybe they've checked out, or they break their leg skiing, or, whatever, all the circumstances that happen in life, that they can depend on the distributorship of your company to provide them some of the leadership, the skill sets, the training, et cetera. Love how you do all of that, because you do it masterfully. I've looked at some of your stuff. You do it very masterfully, but I'd love your thoughts on that, because I think it's very, very relevant.
Well, I think I'm fortunate because I started as a distributor. So my heart is in the distributor field, number one. The company is number two. Now, obviously, we have to have the infrastructure, the company, the leadership in the company, all of the shipping systems, all of the product development systems, all of those things have to be working. We have the product line that we have to worry about and make sure that it's constantly freshened and constantly a value to our distributors and our customers, and our compensation system. Now, we have a very lucrative compensation system. I know everybody says that, and I'm sure they do, and that's great. But one of the things we focus on heavily in the compensation system is not just dollars and cents, but we focus on what we call our passport program, where people have a lifestyle. I believe what our industry gives us and this business gives us, and it's my responsibility to give people, and that is, I want to create a life full of adventure. I don't want to just give them a lot of money. That's great. That's nice, and do it. I don't want to give them just good products. Yes, that's important. But I want to create a life full of adventure with them. We go to places together, to the beaches of the world. We have a passport program that takes them on. When you hit a certain level, you go on an international cruise, and then you go to Tahiti and Bora Bora, and you go to Dubai and get on the sand dunes and that kind of thing. And we do that together. We do that as a team, from the leadership team on down. And so I'll use the word culture. I think the important thing that we create in a company is that culture. And for me, that culture is created because I was a distributor, and I know what it feels like to be a distributor. So, and it's more than just the money. It's about a life full of adventure, from my way of thinking, because that's what it's been for me.
What I love about that answer is there's no distributor who can tell you, you don't know what it's like to have somebody tell you no.
Yeah. I've had people tell me no in every language you can think of. and many times that no is with a bad word in front of it.
I was gonna say, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, you think about, all the great companies in our industry were fundamentally started by distributors. I mean, you think about it, Dr. Shackley was the first Shackley distributor. Yeah. Mary Kay was the first Mary Kay distributor. Jay and Rich were the first Amway distributors. Mark Hughes was the first Herbalife distributor. Yeah. You go down the list, and then your company, same thing. I mean, you were the first, you were the first guy that got told no, and, you're not going to make any money, and you're crazy, and get a job. Right. So, I mean, you've been told all that stuff, but I was interested in asking you that because once again, you come up from a position of strength. And I think one of the things, and I'd love your thoughts on this, and it's not a negative, so let me ask the question properly. But because there's been so many people who've looked at our industry from, let's just use a big example, Warren Buffett's, for example, that are business guys, and they look and they go, hey, you've got a sales force that's independent, that I don't have to collect taxes from, at least in the United States. Some countries they do, right? But, in the United States, I don't have to collect taxes. I can have a huge independent sales force, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, if the company gets large, without all of the normal stuff that they have if that business were a traditional quote unquote business. So our industry's become attracted to investment banker types that have bought, a variety of different companies in our industry. And some of those people have done a decent job, but how do those people that come in from the outside, how do they learn our business and adapt to the independent distributor force? And I could think, I won't name companies, but I could think of a few where it's been a real problem because they came in and said, first thing we're going to do, that was vacations to Dubai. And, well, they're going to go. Why are you giving these people a free vacation? What are you thinking? Come on, Rudy, you're going to give 2,000 people a vacation? What are you, nuts? Spend all that money? What for? Why are you doing that? How did those people cross that invisible divide to our side of the thinking where those trips pay for themselves because the pictures and everything else that somebody goes home with and shows their friends and their family and their would-be prospects that then join the business and the company grows exponentially? How do those people understand it? How do you, as a business guy, explain our business to those people who are intelligent and in some cases incredibly well educated, but they don't understand what guys like you and I have done in the field? They just don't get it.
Well, I'm sorry to say that, but in most cases, from my experience, they very seldom work because they don't understand the business. They don't understand the most important and most valuable asset that any one of our companies has is not our product, no matter how wonderful it is. It's not our corporation, no matter how wonderful it is, but the most valuable asset that any one of us have is that distributor field. And there's nobody more valuable than they are. And that is a hard thing for them to get. Some of those people come in from the outside, and it's not necessarily the people who bought it, the people at the top. It's often the lower level management people that then come in, the accountants and the marketing managers, and they look at it and they say, well, wait a minute, you got this distributor, Robin, she's making $11 million? What? She makes over $1 million a year for doing what? Well, I only make 200,000 and I work this hard but that's not right. So they come in and they figure out how to try to cut that out. How can I bring that down? How do I bring that out? Like you say, those contests. Well, you don't need to take them to Dubai. You could take them down to Mexico, couldn't you? Well, yeah, we could, but that's not the same. And just they don't have that mindset. I'm sorry. No different than me going into their industry. If tomorrow I can thank God for all the accolades I've gotten in this industry and yours, and I appreciate that. But what if I tomorrow went into the, automobile industry and they hired me to go run Ford manufacturing? You think the talents that I have, that I've developed in this industry would translate into making me Lee Iacocca?
Nope.
It's outside my wheelhouse. That's not. And so they come in and it's outside their way of thinking. Unless you get somebody who's very smart, like a Warren Buffett, he puts people in place that he knows know that industry and doesn't try to override it, right? Because he has been successful in some endeavors, and there's some who have, but it's a very difficult transition usually. How many companies have you seen that were turned over to an investment group, and then you don't see them anymore a couple of years later?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It has not turned out well for the most part. But along those lines, kind of the same question, but different context. Now, you've done it successfully where you've had companies that have been in trouble financially or whatever, that you've gone in and been the savior, and thank you for doing that. I know some of the distributors that you saved their checks because they had a check at XYZ company, and now they have a check at your company because you went in and saved the day for all the hard work that they did. How have you done that where you take those cultures, where you got culture A of your existing brand and culture B of another brand that somebody else built and developed, and get those people kind of singing from the same hymn sheet?
I'll be honest, it's very difficult. Okay. Over the years, as you say, I've acquired a lot of smaller companies that were failing. And one of the reasons I did that, John, was because, as I told you, when I was in Germany at the time, and the U.S. company was put out of business, supposedly as a pyramid selling company, but that wasn't really the case. The reason it got put out of business was once they were attacked by the government, they weren't like Rich and Jay and were willing to stand up and fight. The people who were at the head of it at that time wanted to grab their money and leave. And so the U.S. company goes out of business, but Jerry comes in, Jerry Brasfield, and he bought what was left of the company internationally. And so my opportunity was saved. I was in Germany. I was saved. Then they submitted Canada and Italy. But all of the people that I had recruited in the United States, friends, relatives, people that got into business that were happy and doing great in the business, all of a sudden overnight they lost their opportunity. And that devastated me. I mean, I just felt so terrible. Yes, I was okay, but all my friends lost their opportunity. And so I swore to myself, if I ever saw a company that I could save that was possible, I would do it, whatever it took. Not because I cared about the company or their products in most cases. I cared about the distributor field and what was there. And over the years, that's worked well in some cases. You mentioned one, Freddie Elias, who you had on this podcast. Freddie was a company that we acquired I was with a company we acquired. It was not doing well financially, and we acquired it and brought him into the singular business, and he became a hero. He became a superstar with us. And so if it wasn't for me acquiring that company, where would Freddie be today? Back in construction, trying to build a house and make a couple of $100,000 instead of he's made millions in this time. So to me, that's a personal thing, more so than to grow my business. It's to save the distributor. So I don't know that that answers your question or not, but over the years, we've done a lot of it.
It does, because that's you know, I've watched that movie. I mean, you've lived it. I've been part of it twice. Once from a corporate standpoint, and once from a consulting standpoint with companies that I either was corporate with here in Dallas or was working with one of the big companies that I was consulting for, and I watched them do it. And in one case, it turned out okay because the products was similar. And the secondary company that we acquired wasn't even really an acquisition. It was really just kind of a roll it into the company. It worked because the products were similar and the field was very young. Mm-hmm. The second time, though, was with a very established company. And I advised these people not to do what they did, and they took it in because it was a totally different industry. It was like, you know, square pegs, round holes versus round holes and round holes, or square pegs and square pegs. And it didn't really work. And if anything, it caused a lot more angst, where the company that was in trouble would have been better staying in technology, going to a technology type of company than to go with a nutritional type of company. So I just wondered how you handle that, because you've done it masterfully, and, you know, not easily, certainly, as you say. A lot of headaches.
It's never easy, and we always approach it with, okay, whatever the company is doing, it's going to be 50% of those sales is all it's going to survive. Yeah, you go in it with that attitude. Right. Hopefully you can do better, but we know we're going to lose 50% just because the culture change often. Change is hard on people to begin with. People who aren't super committed, it gives them an excuse to depart, right? The quote, leadership who has been sitting around collecting a check instead of working, it's tough on them to make a change like that, because now they got to go back to work, you know. So it's very difficult. But to answer the question, how do you do it? You have to go one-on-one out in that field. Mm-hmm. When I did this, every single one of these companies, I went out and I visit every single area where they had distributors. Whether it was 10 distributors or 1,000 distributors, I would go in and personally meet people and shake hands. Why? We're a relationship business. I keep coming back to that, right? If you build relationships, people will buy you. They don't buy the product. They don't buy the company. They buy you. Mm-hmm. And if you can get them to buy you and you tell them the truth and you're honest with them, most people, if they're still willing to work, will hang on. Well, if you were to ask Freddie, and don't do it on a podcast or anything, but if you were to ask Freddie why he stayed, I remember days when I met with him at a restaurant, he and 3 other ladies that were at that time, they weren't top distributors in that company. They were good distributors, but not top. And I went and I personally met with them, flew to them and met with them and sat down and answered their questions. And I think Freddie would tell you, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, he bought me. He didn't buy the company. He didn't buy the products. He didn't buy the, he bought me.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I know that because I have talked to him about that, and you know, how you did that, you know, and how you transitioned and how you took care of those people, and you cared about their needs as opposed to the corporate needs of the bottom line. And, you know, here you got some very committed people. So let's talk about this, Rudy. It's something that you know, came up in a couple of other interviews that I listened. I know faith is very important to you and your family. Talk about how that's guided you in your business and your ethics, your values, how you deal with people, and, you know, most importantly, what your commitment is to people who don't have faith. Because I think we're at a point, and some of our listeners may be in a situation where, you know, they're questioning their faith. They look at some of the things happening in the world and they say, why? And love your thoughts on that, both from a business standpoint and a personal standpoint.
Well, for me personally, I have a very personal relationship with the Lord, and I cherish that, and I share it as often as I can, and I certainly don't hide from it. In the past, I have had in our business, I've had people come up to me at meetings and say, well, you know, Rudy, not everybody believes, so maybe you shouldn't talk about that from the front of the room. And how strongly I believe in God, and I believe in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and I talk about that. I don't say you can't be in our business. I mean, gosh, we have people in our business from every religion. got Jews and Buddhists, and we've got Muslims in our business, and we've got, I mean, I have business going on in a lot of the Middle East, Kuwait, Dubai, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi. We have business there. So obviously we let anybody in our business, but that doesn't mean I hide from my faith. I share what I believe in. Doesn't mean you'd have to believe it if you don't want to, but I'm not going to hide from who I am. And so we are very open about our faith. And I strongly believe that nothing happens by accident. Let me tell you a fast story, because I told you about my the book that I authored, Iron String, about my family. My grandpa was in the United States after World War I, working in a factory in Passaic, New Jersey. Tran, you know Passaic. He was a tan, worked 5 days a week. But on Sundays, he went to a family that was a relative's family that was here also, and would have lunch. And there was a lady there, her name was Helen, whose husband had been killed in the war, and she had a young boy. And my grandpa, to give her a break, would babysit this young boy. And he'd take him to the park and they'd play or whatever. And this young boy would teach my grandpa some English, speaking English, and my grandpa would teach him some German, okay? Fast forward, World War II comes. My grandpa came back after after he was here for a few years. He went back to Romania. My dad's on a farm and all of that. World War II comes. My dad's off at war. He's in Russia. He gets captured by the Russians, works his way back. After the war, my family were refugees of a refugee camp in Austria, sent to southern Germany. They were put in a barn, over a barn, because that's normal in Europe, where the barn and the homes are connected. So they cleaned out the hayloft and put my family in there. Not me. I wasn't born yet. My sisters, my mom, my dad. My dad's a hard worker, so he helped on his farm, and then he got a job. He wound up working in construction. They finally get a home. My grandpa and grandma could come to America because he had been here. So they went to get permits to come to America. They came right away. Now my mom and dad want to go to America. So he goes to Nuremberg, which is where the Americans were, and you had to get permission. It was all military at that time who you were dealing with after the war. And he went there 2 times, and they rejected him because he had been a German soldier. No, he wasn't a Nazi or anything, but he was a German soldier, so he got put at the bottom of the list. It wasn't like it was bad, but it wasn't the first guy that you're going to send to America. So he says to my mom, I'm trying to condense the story. He says to my mom, this is after I'm born now. I'm about 4 years old at this point. He says to my mom, he says, Mary, I'm going to go one more time to Nuremberg and try to get permission to come to the States. And if they reject us this time, let's just make our life here in Germany. Because they had a nice at home now, things were better, they were prospering. Okay, so he goes to Nuremberg and he goes in front of what they call judges. The judges were military men who were assigned this job of approving people to go to the States or not. He puts his paperwork down in front of one of these judges. And the judge looks at the paperwork and looks up at my dad and he says, Stefan Revak, Steve Revak. Stefan Revak. Do you know another Stefan Revak? My dad says, well, yeah, my dad's name is Stefan also. Was he ever in America? Said, yeah, he was in some place in New Jersey or something like that, working in a factory years ago. Make a long story short, this captain in the military, a judge, is the little boy that my grandpa went on Sundays with to the park. Can you believe? Don't tell me there's no God. I mean, that doesn't happen to millions of people. That was an accident? No way. No accident. And he says, Steve, you're going to America. And that's how we got here.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's a true story.
Yeah.
And so I believe strongly that there are guidance.
That's
whenever you pray, whenever you ask for something, there's 3 answers. The answer could be yes, he gives you what you want. Number 2 answer could be, not yet. Or number 3 is, you know what? I got something better for you.
Mm-hmm.
What you're asking for may not be what you really should have. And so give it some time and you'll find something better. And I have always found that if I keep my faith, if I do what I need to do, there's always a right answer at the end of that. It's like that, you ever heard that Garth Brooks song? There was a Garth Brooks song that said, thank God for unanswered prayers or something.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's something better. What he was praying for didn't happen, but gosh, something better came along. Well, and so I really believe that's true. And I believe our industry is a godsend. I think our industry, because it's a way that we can share with other people and help other people succeed. And I believe, like the Bible says, I have to share my talents. I have to share my financial resources, right? And I have to share my faith. And if I do that, there's always going to be a good outcome at the end. Doesn't happen. No, it doesn't always happen like I want it to. Okay. It hasn't all been perfect, and it's been really tough. But gosh, in the end, it always works out.
It's funny because in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens with us as guys, right? Or, we're in business for ourselves. Things are going well, right? The ego gets a little bit out of control, right? I've been guilty of it. I won't say I've never been guilty of it. I've been guilty of it too, like a lot of people have.
Sure.
I have to remind myself, thy will, not John's will, his will, be done. So but that's an amazing story. That's a God thing again. And that's an amazing story. If you had to say that there was one big, hairy, audacious goal, to quote Dr. Jim Collins here, I got that big, hairy, audacious goal thing from Good to Great. And what would it be at 77? You've done so well in business. You've inspired tens of thousands of people. But what's that one thing left, maybe, that you say, hey, you wake up at 3:00 in the morning and you say, I still need to do that. What is it?
It's still as it was my business of changing more people's lives, of going to the next event and hoping that there's one person in that room that listens. I never go in a room of 1,000 people and say, well, I'm going to change their lives. No, I go in with the attitude, there's the one person in this room, because I was the one person years ago. See, Jim didn't know that I was going to be the one. Jim Rohn didn't know that I was the one who was going to listen to what he said like a magnet. I took in everything. So I'm always looking for that next person that maybe I could help change. That, I mentioned Rob, one of our top distributors, when she joined our business, and you've got stories like this, thousands of them too, but she joined our business and her husband had left her. She had $14 in the bank and children to support, didn't know what to do. And here she is, years later, millions of dollars that she's earned. Now, she earned every penny of it and still is and works hard at it every day. But for me to know that I had a little bit to do with that, right? Maybe in a training, maybe just from setting up the company, maybe because of information, a conversation. That's what makes me feel the best and still makes me love doing this.
And, you talk about Robin, you referenced her, you referenced our mutual friend, Freddie. What do you think the difference is between that, Robin or Freddie, that makes it, that becomes known in a company as one of the people, the leaders, right, that are representative of that company, associated with that company, versus the guy or gal or couple who maybe had equal skills, maybe even had better skills, right? If you just looked at them, this way, right, and just said, wow, they have all of these attributes, but for some reason you go 90 days from now, whatever happened to so-and-so and so-and-so, versus the people like Fred or like Robin that go on and achieve in your company. What do you think that one difference is?
Whenever I'm speaking, I always focus on the one thing that really makes the difference. And I mentioned it before, and it was for me, it was persistence. Because nothing in this industry comes easy. Nothing in life comes easy. Nothing is going to be given to you. The hardships make us better, make us stronger. And if you've got that ability to persist, if you've got that dream in front of you, remember, I just mentioned there are several things that I think make the difference. It was dreams or goals, if you want to use that word, goals, right? But the vision for the future, right? Man without vision will perish. So you got to have the vision for the future. Number two, you've got to have attitude. That attitude, building your positive attitude constantly. And that takes work constantly and takes persistence constantly. Because in those early, remember, what really did Marty do when he gave me those 10 paper clips? Yeah, he got me talking to people, but what he did was he changed my attitude. Because every time I talked to someone and got a no, I was down. All of a sudden now, my goal wasn't get people involved or sell. My goal was just to talk to people. And so my attitude went up because I was talking to people. I was happy. See? So attitude, belief in the company, belief in your product, belief in your opportunity, but most of all, belief in you. That takes a long time. I don't care where you come from. You can be the most successful doctor today, but you get into a new industry, you're starting from scratch. Yes, you've got some basic talents. You may be successful as a nurse or as a teacher or as a business person. But now all of a sudden you get into a business of your own like ours. It's a relationship business. You're going to have some downs. And so you have to believe in yourself that you can. And the only way you get that is through time. So if you never have the persistence, you never give yourself the time to believe in you, right? And the other thing is your work ethic. Now, I didn't have a problem with that because I came from the farm. And you know what you notice, John, if you look around in this industry, you'll see that a lot of people who become very successful in this business, become good leaders in this, where do they come from?
Yeah. Agriculture, construction, real work.
And a lot of them were farmers. I mean, we have our business, we got all these cowgirls and cowboys and that are there. Why? Because they know how to work. So
it's funny you say that, because that was the thing in June of 1983, 21-year-old kid, Hartford, Connecticut, all the other pomp and circumstance that an Herbalife meeting was about, where I started my career. You know what I got? I got Larry Thompson hung drywall.
Yeah.
I was the son of a union electrician. I worked summers and vacations and weekends and everything else, carrying pipe and carrying cable, okay, for the guys on the job at $5 an hour, right? I knew what work was. And I'm like, oh, this guy knows what work is. And I'm thinking, talking to people versus going in manholes when it's, you know, you're from New Jersey, I'm from New Jersey, you know, going in there this time of year when it's 100, or the middle of January when it's -10, that's real work.
Yes.
I'm going to get paid to talk to people. I think I'm almost doing something wrong, you know, until you figure it out that, yes, it is work, but there's work and then there's work, I think is what, you know, you made a very eloquent point that there's chicken farming's working.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. God forgot to tell the chickens that on Sunday's the day off. They still want
to. At 3 a.m. if it's -10 degrees, yeah, those guys, they still want their food, you know?
Yeah.
I love it.
But so those things, but they're all based on persistence. When you ask for that one thing, how do you get to your vision and maintain it? How do you get to the work ethic? How do you get to the believability? How do you get to the attitude? It's by hanging out and coming around to the next meeting, being on the next Zoom, going to the next conference, getting around people. That's what does it, in my opinion.
Would you say, you know, it's brilliant what you just said there. Would you say that that could be summed up as the right environment of people that they put themselves in versus maybe the wrong environment of the people who are complaining about life or the government or all the other things that people complain about these days, right? Which you know, maybe there's even maybe they're even validated to complain about those things, but nothing is going to change unless they decide to make those changes in their life for them and forget all the things that they cannot control.
My attitude towards that is get away from those negative people. You know, when I say that to people, they say, well, you mean if my friends or relatives tell me something negative, I should walk away? No, I'll tell you like Jim Rohn said, run, get in a car and drive. You get out of there fast because they'll bring you down. Get around people. I believe involvement equals success. The more you get involved with other successful people, whether it's on our Zoom calls or it's on our meetings, or it's on our one-on-ones, or what we call sip and C's, home meetings, right? Or it's a three-way call with your uplines and positive people. It's those involvements that create your success. And then you go out in that negative 95% of the world, and what happens? They try to tear you down. So you have to get your self back into that battery charger by being involved with positive people. And pretty soon you go through this cycle like I did when I was a young kid. Yes, I'd get positive coming to the meeting. Then I go out there and people saying, no, it won't work. You can't do, I don't want to buy. Pretty soon you're down. I drag myself back in. That's the persistence part. Boom, they pump me back up and I'd go out. And then, you know what, after doing that for a while, pretty soon, years later, I was the battery charger. People were coming to me to get charged up. But it all takes time. You've got to be persistent.
And you know, along those lines, what's your thoughts on this statement, right? Keep showing up. If you think the meeting is boring, change it, right? Or if you think that you don't need to be there, take a look at the people in the room that are successful and say, well,
or you've heard this before?
Yeah.
Why do I need to go again? Because I've heard it before. Yeah, well, get in there.
Yeah.
You need to keep rehearing it.
Just keep coming. Just keep coming. Well, Rudy, I think we could probably do about 10 interviews. There's a lot more I want to ask you. So let's do this again at some point. But this has just been amazing and once again stimulating. Good for me. Even you know, as a 40-plus-year-old guy in the industry, you know, good for me because some of the concepts that you touched on, they're timeless, they're ageless. These are things that the next generation and the next generation that might not even know Rudy Revak or John Soloder or any other great people we mentioned here today are going to be doing in our industry down the road and changing lives. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to give you the last word.
Look, all I'll say is this in closing. I believe that this industry is still, has been, always will be, and is today the greatest opportunity for the average person to reach financial independence, to reach their dreams, and to build a life full of adventure. I don't think there's a better way than this on the earth. There are other ways, but there's no way better than this industry.
Thank you for everything you've done and everything that you're still going to do for many, many decades to come to inspire people in our industry.
Thanks. Nice sharing with you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Soloder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.